The moment William Parker caught sight of her sliding across the ice, time seemed to slow. He lunged forward without thinking, one arm reaching out while the other instinctively tightened around his daughter's hand, his worn boots somehow finding traction where expensive heels had failed. "Whoa there," he said, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline as his hand closed around the stranger's arm. "I've got you." Her startled green eyes met his, wide with surprise and something else, relief perhaps, or embarrassment. A few strands of auburn hair had escaped her elegant knot, framing a face that was striking even in its momentary vulnerability. "Thank you," she breathed, her gloved hand gripping his forearm as she regained her balance. That could have been disastrous. William smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. "These sidewalks are treacherous after a freeze. The city never salts this neighborhood properly." The woman glanced down at her impractical footwear and laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the gray January morning. "I should have known better than to wear these today." A small voice piped up from beside William. "My daddy says function over fashion when it's icy." William felt a flush creep up his neck as the woman's gaze shifted to his 6-year-old daughter, bundled in a coat that was slightly too large room to grow, he justified when buying it secondhand. "That's very wise advice," the woman said, crouching slightly to meet the child's eyes. "What's your name?" "Emma," the girl replied, swinging her father's hand. "I'm 6 3/4. "Well, Emma 6 3/4, I'm Audrey, and I think your daddy just saved me from a very embarrassing fall." She straightened and extended her hand to William. "Audrey Keller." "William Parker," he replied, taking her hand. Despite the glove, he could feel the warmth of her palm against his. "And we were happy to help, weren't we, Em?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, her blonde pigtails bouncing under her knit hat. "Are you okay now?" "Daddy says we have to look out for people in trouble." Something in Audrey's expression softened. "Your daddy sounds like a good man." She glanced at her watch, a subtle but unmistakably expensive timepiece, and grimaced. "I should get going. I'm already late for a meeting." "Of course," William said, stepping back. "Be careful out there." She nodded, taking a tentative step on the ice before turning back. "Thank you again, William and Emma Parker." As she walked away, her posture perfect despite the treacherous conditions, William couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked in this working-class neighborhood, like a rare bird that had somehow landed in their modest corner of the city. "Daddy, she was pretty," Emma observed, tugging at his hand as they resumed their walk to her school. "Yes, she was," William agreed, his mind already shifting back to the realities of his day. Dropping Emma off before rushing to his construction job, picking her up from after-school care, preparing dinner, reviewing homework, and then maybe, if he was lucky, getting an hour to work on job applications for positions that might finally put his engineering degree to use. He pushed the encounter from his mind. Women like Audrey Keller didn't exist in his world beyond chance meetings on icy sidewalks. 3 days later, William was balanced precariously on a ladder outside Emma's elementary school, repairing a section of guttering that had come loose during the last storm. The school couldn't afford a professional contractor, so when they'd learned one of the parents worked construction, they'd asked if he might help in exchange for a reduction in Emma's after-school care fees. He couldn't afford to say no to such an arrangement, even if it meant spending his Saturday up a ladder in the bitter cold. "Mr. Parker," a voice called from below. William looked down, nearly dropping his screwdriver when he recognized Audrey Keller standing at the foot of his ladder, looking remarkably different in jeans and a casual sweater, though no less elegant. "Miss Keller," he managed, surprised she remembered his name. "This is unexpected." "Please call me Audrey," she said, smiling up at him. "And yes, I suppose it is. I volunteer here sometimes literacy program." She gestured toward the school building. "When I saw you up there, I thought I'd say hello and thank you properly for the other day." William descended the ladder, wiping his hands on his work pants. "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "Not true," she countered. "I've lived in this city long enough to know that many people would have walked right past. Besides, it's not every day someone catches me when I'm falling." There was something in her tone that made the simple statement feel weighted with additional meaning. Well, I'm glad I was there, William said, suddenly aware of how rough his hands looked compared to hers, how his clothes bore the marks of honest labor while hers, though casual, were clearly expensive. Is Emma here today? Audrey asked, glancing around. William shook his head. She's with a friend from her class. I try to arrange playdates when I have to work weekends. He didn't mention that these playdates were carefully negotiated with other single parents who understood the value of trading childcare. You're doing all this work alone. Audrey asked, taking in the scope of the repair project. William shrugged. The school's on a tight budget. I'm happy to help. Emma loves it here. That's really commendable, Audrey said, and William was surprised to see genuine admiration in her expression. Would you like some help? I'm surprisingly good with tools for someone who usually wears heels. He laughed, unable to picture this woman wielding a hammer. Thanks, but I've got it covered. Wouldn't want to ruin your sweater. This old thing. She said with a dismissive wave that didn't quite match the quality of the cashmere. At least let me buy you lunch. The deli across the street makes a great sandwich. William hesitated. It had been a long time since he'd had lunch with an attractive woman, longer still since one had sought him out. Since Julia had left 2 years ago, claiming she couldn't handle being married to a man who'd wasted his potential. His social life had consisted primarily of parent-teacher conferences and the occasional beer with coworkers. I should really finish this before the weather turns, he hedged. I'll bring it back here, Audrey offered. You have to eat, right? Her persistence surprised him. Right, he conceded. Turkey on rye if they have it. Let me give you some cash, my treat, she interrupted. Consider it payment for emergency sidewalk rescue services. Before he could protest further, she was walking away, leaving William staring after her with a mixture of confusion and something dangerously close to hope. Audrey returned with not only sandwiches, but also hot coffee and cookies. They sat on a bench in the school playground, the cold keeping them close together as they ate. So, Audrey said between bites, Emma mentioned you're an engineer. William nearly choked on his sandwich. By education, yes, BS in civil engineering from state. But the recession hit right as I graduated, and construction was the only work I could find. He took a sip of coffee. Been trying to make the leap back ever since, but it's hard when firms want recent experience. Audrey nodded thoughtfully. That must be frustrating. What's your specialty? Structural engineering, particularly sustainable design, William replied, surprised by her interest. I've been taking online courses to stay current, but between work and Emma, time is tight. And Emma's mother? Audrey asked gently. William's expression closed slightly. Not in the picture. Left when Emma was 4, said she'd signed up for a husband, not a laborer. Her loss, Audrey said simply, and the genuine conviction in her voice made William look at her more closely. What about you? He asked. What brings someone like you to volunteer at an underfunded public school? If she noticed his implicit acknowledgement of their different social standings, she didn't show it. I believe in education. It's the greatest equalizer we have. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. And I like kids. They're honest in a way adults rarely are. That they are, William agreed, thinking of Emma's unfiltered observations. Emma told everyone at school about the pretty lady who almost fell for days after we met you. Audrey laughed. I'm flattered to have made such an impression. She paused, seeming to debate something internally before continuing. I'm hosting a fundraiser next weekend for the literacy program. Nothing fancy, just a dinner at my place. Would you and Emma like to come? William blinked, taken aback by the invitation. That's kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition if I'm inviting you, Audrey countered. Besides, Emma might enjoy it. I have a pretty impressive collection of children's books that need a critical reviewer. The mention of Emma's potential enjoyment was calculated, and they both knew it. William found himself smiling despite his reservations. She does love books, he admitted. Then it's settled, Audrey said, pulling out her phone. Can I get your number? I'll text you the details. As William recited his contact information, he wondered what he was getting himself into. Women like Audrey lived in different worlds than men like him. Yet there was something about her, a genuineness beneath the polish that made him want to know more. Audrey's place turned out to be a penthouse apartment in the city's most exclusive high-rise. a fact that had William second guessing their attendance right up, until Emma's excited gasp at the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Daddy, look, the whole city," she exclaimed, her nose pressed against the glass. "It's like being in an airplane but not moving." William had to admit the view was spectacular, though not as captivating as the sight of Audrey gliding toward them in a simple but elegant black dress, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way that made her look younger, more approachable. "You made it," she said, her smile warming her entire face. "I'm so glad." William adjusted his tie borrowed from a coworker who'd attended a funeral the previous month. "Thank you for inviting us. Your home is impressive." "It's just a place," Audrey said with a shrug that suggested she was aware of how that statement might sound to someone like him. "The company matters more than the setting." She crouched down to Emma's level. "What do you think of the view, Emma?" "It's like being a bird," Emma declared. "Do you ever open the windows and pretend to fly?" Audrey laughed. "The windows don't open that wide for safety reasons, but I do sometimes pretend I'm floating above the city." She straightened and gestured toward a hallway. "Would you like to see those books I mentioned before the other guests arrive?" Emma looked to her father for permission, bouncing on her toes when he nodded. Audrey led them down a corridor to a room that made both Parkers stop in their tracks. It was a library straight out of a fairy tale, walls lined with bookshelves, comfortable reading nooks tucked into corners, and a section clearly designed for children, complete with beanbag chairs and a small table. "This is better than our school library," Emma exclaimed, immediately drawn to the colorful spines of children's classics. "Feel free to explore," Audrey told her. "Any book you want to borrow, just let me know." As Emma dove into the collection, William gave Audrey a questioning look. "You have quite the children's section for someone without kids." "The literacy program," she explained. "I often have the children here for reading sessions. Plus," she added with a hint of vulnerability, "I never outgrew my love of a good story." There was something in her expression that made William wonder what stories had shaped her life, what narratives she carried beneath her polished exterior. The fundraiser itself was smaller than William had anticipated, just a dozen guests, all connected to the literacy program in some way. Throughout the evening, he observed Audrey with growing fascination. She moved easily among her guests, attentive and engaging, but never showing off her obvious wealth. In fact, if he hadn't seen the penthouse, he might not have guessed her financial status from her behavior alone. Emma, meanwhile, had charmed everyone, particularly an older gentleman who turned out to be the retired principal of the very school she attended. William found her curled up in the library with a stack of books as the evening wound down, fighting sleep but unwilling to surrender to it. "I think it's time we headed home, Pumpkin," he said gently, lifting her into his arms. "But Daddy," she protested weakly, "I haven't finished reading about the dragon." "The dragon will be here next time," Audrey said from the doorway, then looked at William with a question in her eyes. "If there is a next time." Over Emma's head, their gazes held, and William felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, that this evening had marked a beginning rather than an isolated event. "I think the dragon would be disappointed if Emma didn't come back to finish the story," he said quietly. Audrey's smile was soft as she walked them to the door. The other guests had already departed, leaving the three of them alone in the expansive apartment. "Thank you for coming," she said, her hand lingering on William's arm. "It meant a lot to have you both here." "Thank you for having us," he replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the subtle scent of her perfume. Emma, drowsy but still observant, looked between them. "Daddy, Audrey is nice. Can she come to our house too?" William felt heat rise to his face. "Emma, I'd love to," Audrey interrupted, her eyes never leaving William's. "If your daddy is okay with that." The invitation to his modest apartment should have felt like an obligation she was accepting out of politeness, but something in her expression suggested otherwise, a genuine desire to see more of their world, just as they had seen hers. "Sunday dinner," he found himself saying. "Nothing fancy, but Emma helps make spaghetti, and we've been told our sauce is pretty special." "Sunday dinner sounds perfect," Audrey replied, and for a moment, William could almost believe that this extraordinary woman saw something in him worth knowing beyond a chance encounter on an icy street. As they rode the elevator down from the penthouse, Emma already asleep against his shoulder, William wondered if he was setting himself up for disappointment. Women like Audrey Keller didn't usually find lasting connections with single fathers working construction. Yet he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, or the way she seemed to see past his circumstances to the man beneath. The spaghetti dinner at William's apartment was a revelation for Audrey. She arrived precisely on time, bearing a bottle of wine that cost more than William's weekly grocery budget, though he wouldn't have known that from its unassuming label. His apartment was small but meticulously maintained, a testament to his engineering mind, she thought, noticing how every space was efficiently utilized. Emma proudly gave her a tour, emphasizing her favorite spots. The window seat William had built where she read after school, the height chart marked on the kitchen doorframe, the collection of rocks and feathers arranged on her dresser. "And this is where we make the special sauce," Emma announced as they entered the kitchen, where William was already at work, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms. "Special sauce, huh?" Audrey said, setting the wine on the counter. "What makes it special?" "Secret ingredients," Emma replied solemnly, "but since you're our friend, I can tell you." She beckoned Audrey closer and whispered, "Love and cinnamon." "Cinnamon," Audrey repeated, raising an eyebrow at William. He shrugged, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Don't knock it till you've tried it. It was my grandmother's recipe." "I wouldn't dream of criticizing family tradition," Audrey said, removing her cashmere cardigan. "How can I help?" William seemed momentarily startled by her offer. "You don't have to, I want to," she insisted, rolling up her own sleeves. "Put me to work, Chef Parker." And so Audrey Keller, whose net worth could have purchased the entire apartment building several times over, found herself chopping onions at a scratched countertop while Emma solemnly measured out the secret cinnamon and William worked on the sauce. The domesticity of it struck her halfway through how easy it felt, how natural to be in this small kitchen with these two people she barely knew. When was the last time she'd felt this comfortable, this present? In her world of board meetings and investment decisions, genuine connections were rare, often obscured by the shadow of her wealth. The meal itself was delicious, the cinnamon adding an unexpected depth to the sauce, but it was the conversation that Audrey treasured. Emma chattered about school and her friends, William occasionally interjecting with gentle corrections or clarifications. They asked Audrey questions about her volunteer work, her favorite books, places she'd traveled, but never about her job or background. It was refreshing to be seen as just Audrey, not Audrey Keller of Keller Innovations. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Audrey her bedtime routine, which included selecting a book for her father to read aloud. To William's surprise, Emma chose a chapter book rather than her usual picture book. "This one has more words," Emma explained to Audrey, "so you can stay longer." The transparent manipulation made both adults laugh, but neither objected. They settled on Emma's bed, the child between them as William began reading a story about a brave young knight. His reading voice was rich and expressive, creating different tones for each character, and Audrey found herself as captivated as Emma. By the time the chapter ended, Emma was fighting to keep her eyes open. "One more," she pleaded. "Not tonight, pumpkin," William said gently. "It's already past your bedtime." Emma sighed dramatically but accepted her fate, wrapping her arms around her father's neck for a goodnight hug before surprising Audrey with one as well. "Will you come back?" she whispered against Audrey's ear. "If I'm invited," Audrey whispered back, something tightening in her chest at the hopeful look in the child's eyes. Once Emma was tucked in, William and Audrey retreated to the small living room, where he poured the wine she'd brought into two mismatched glasses. "She's wonderful," Audrey said as they settled onto the worn but comfortable sofa. "You're doing an amazing job with her." William took a sip of wine, his expression thoughtful. "I try. Some days are harder than others." "I can imagine," Audrey said, though truthfully she couldn't not really. Her life had been one of privilege, insulated from the kind of struggles William faced daily. "Can I ask you something?" William said after a moment, of course. What were you doing in this neighborhood that morning, the day we met? This isn't exactly on the way to anywhere someone like you would typically go. Audrey considered her answer carefully. I was actually looking at a potential site for a community center. The literacy program needs a permanent home, and I have some influence with the funders. It wasn't a lie, though it omitted the fact that she was the primary funder, that Keller Innovations was planning to convert an abandoned warehouse into a multipurpose community space at her direction. That would be incredible for the neighborhood, William said, his eyes lighting up. This area has so much potential, but it needs investment, real investment, not just developers looking to gentrify and push families like mine out. I couldn't agree more, Audrey said, warming to the subject. Economic development shouldn't mean displacement. It should mean creating opportunities for the people already living there. William looked at her with new interest. You sound like you've given this a lot of thought. I have, she admitted. My background is actually in urban planning and sustainable development, She hesitated, careful not to reveal too much, moved into my current role. And what is your current role? William asked, the question casual but his eyes sharp with genuine curiosity. Audrey took a larger sip of wine than intended. This was always the moment when things changed, when people learned who she was, and either became intimidated or opportunistic. She'd guarded her privacy carefully since taking over Keller Innovations 5 years ago, but in the age of internet searches, complete anonymity was nearly impossible. I work in corporate leadership, she said vaguely, but urban planning remains a passion. To her relief, William didn't press further. Instead, he began sharing his own ideas about neighborhood revitalization, speaking with an enthusiasm that transformed him. This was the engineer, Audrey realized, the man whose potential had been temporarily sidelined but never extinguished. As he spoke about sustainable design principles and community-centered development, Audrey found herself not just listening but imagining possibilities for the neighborhood, for her company's foundation, and increasingly, for whatever was growing between them. Their conversation flowed easily from urban planning to books they'd read, movies they'd seen, and gradually to more personal territory, William's upbringing in a working-class family where education was valued above all else. Audrey's childhood as the daughter of a visionary but often absent father. He built something remarkable, she said of her father, careful to keep the details vague, but sometimes I think he forgot why he was building it in the first place. And what was that? William asked. To make a difference, Audrey replied simply. Not just to accumulate wealth or accolades, but to actually improve people's lives. William nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's a worthy legacy to aspire to. It is, Audrey agreed, suddenly aware of how late it had grown. I should probably go. It's getting late and you have work tomorrow. Right, William said, setting down his glass with reluctance. Thank you for coming. Emma was thrilled to have you here. Just Emma? Audrey asked, a teasing note in her voice that surprised even her. William met her gaze, and the intensity she found there sent a pleasant warmth through her. No, he said quietly, not just Emma. At the door, there was a moment of uncertainty, a hesitation that spoke of mutual attraction tempered by their different circumstances. Audrey made the decision for both of them, leaning in to press a soft kiss to his cheek. I'd like to see you again, she said, stepping back. Both of you. William's smile was slow but genuine. We'd like that too. Over the next few weeks, Audrey became a regular presence in the Parkers' lives. She joined them for Sunday dinners, took Emma to museums on Saturdays while William worked extra shifts, and occasionally met William for coffee during his lunch breaks. She was careful about maintaining the partial fiction of her identity, never outright lying, but allowing William to believe she held a senior but not exceptional position at a corporate foundation. It wasn't ideal, but she'd learned the hard way that wealth created barriers, and she wanted to be sure of what was between them before introducing that complication. William, for his part, never seemed to question why someone of Audrey's obvious education and refinement would spend so much time with a construction worker and his daughter. He accepted her presence in their lives with a gratitude that sometimes made Audrey uncomfortable, not because she didn't want his appreciation, but because she knew she wasn't being entirely honest with him. The truth nearly came out one evening when William picked up a business magazine someone had left in the break room at his construction site. Audrey's face stared back at him from the cover. Beneath the headline, Keller Innovations CEO announces $50 million community development initiative. He brought it up during their next coffee meeting, his expression unreadable. "You're more connected than you let on." Audrey's heart raced, but William continued before she could respond. "The community center you mentioned, it's part of the Keller Innovations initiative, isn't it? You must be pretty high up in their foundation to have that kind of influence." Relief washed over her. He'd seen the magazine but hadn't made the full connection. "Yes," she said, the admission feeling like both truth and lie simultaneously. "I have significant input into their philanthropic decisions." William nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That's impressive. I'm glad organizations like that have people like you making decisions." The guilt that followed Audrey home that evening was substantial. She'd grown to care deeply for William and Emma, too deeply to continue this partial deception much longer. Yet she feared that revealing her true position would irrevocably change things between them. The revelation came in the most unexpected way. William had finally secured an interview with an engineering firm specializing in sustainable urban development, his dream opportunity. The position would mean better hours, significantly higher pay, and most importantly, the chance to use his education and skills. He'd prepared meticulously, reviewing technical concepts late into the night after Emma was asleep, updating his portfolio with theoretical projects he'd designed in his limited free time. Audrey had helped, quizzing him on current industry standards and offering encouragement when his confidence wavered. The morning of the interview, William dropped Emma at school and headed downtown to the modern glass building that housed PKM Design Group. He was nervous but prepared, dressed in his one good suit purchased for the occasion with money he'd saved from extra weekend work. The receptionist directed him to a conference room where 3 people awaited, 2 men and a woman, all in professional attire befitting one of the city's premier firms. As William entered, his confident greeting died on his lips. Sitting at the head of the table, reviewing his resume with a slight frown, was Audrey. Not Audrey as he knew her in casual clothes with her hair loose, and her expression warm, but Audrey in full professional mode. Hair swept into a severe knot, designer suit impeccably tailored, the subtle but unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "William," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "please have a seat." The interview proceeded in a surreal haze. William answered questions on structural principles, sustainable materials, and project management, while trying to reconcile the woman before him with the Audrey who had read stories to Emma and helped wash dishes in his small kitchen. The other interviewers seemed impressed with his responses, but Audrey remained inscrutable, her questions professional and distant. When the interview concluded, she asked her colleagues to give them a moment alone. As the door closed behind them, the conference room fell into heavy silence. "You're Audrey Keller," William finally said, the pieces falling into place. "CEO of Keller Innovations, the Audrey Keller." She nodded, her expression guarded. "I am. The penthouse, the fundraiser that wasn't for some foundation you work for. That was you, your money, your company." "Yes." William ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Audrey's professional facade cracked slightly. "Because the moment people know who I am, everything changes. They either want something from me or they're intimidated by me. I just wanted to be normal, to see if what I was feeling for you was real, not complicated by my position." "And what exactly are you feeling?" William asked, his voice low. Audrey met his gaze directly. "I'm falling in love with you, William, with you and Emma both. That's real, regardless of my last name or bank account." William stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I don't know what to think right now. All this time I've been, what, some experiment in normalcy for you?" "No," Audrey said firmly, rising to join him. "Never that. You've been the most genuine connection I've had in years. I just wanted to protect that for as long as possible. By lying to me, By omission, she corrected gently. I never lied about who I am as a person, only about my professional position. William turned to face her. And this interview? Was this your doing? Some charity project for the struggling single dad? Hurt flashed across Audrey's features. I had nothing to do with your selection for this interview. PKM is a separate company entirely. I'm just on their advisory board. Your resume and portfolio got you this opportunity, William, nothing else. He wanted to believe her, but doubt had crept in, coloring his perception of their entire relationship. How can I know that? How can I trust anything now? Because you know me, Audrey said simply. The real me, not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the woman who loves cinnamon in spaghetti sauce and falls on icy sidewalks and reads stories with Emma. That person is real, William. That's who I am beneath everything else. William was silent for a long moment, processing her words. I need time, he finally said. This is a lot to take in. Audrey nodded, stepping back to give him space. I understand. For what it's worth, the panel was genuinely impressed with you. This position is yours if you want it, regardless of what happens between us. I don't want anything I haven't earned, William said stiffly. You've earned it, Audrey assured him. Your knowledge and experience speak for themselves. As William left the building, his emotions were in turmoil. He felt betrayed, yet he couldn't deny the truth in Audrey's words. The woman who had become so important to him and Emma over these past weeks, was she any less real because of her wealth and position? The following days were difficult. Emma asked repeatedly when Audrey was coming for dinner again, and William had no good answer. He threw himself into his construction work, trying to sort through his feelings. A week after the interview, William received a job offer from PKM Design Group, a legitimate position with a salary that would transform his and Emma's lives. The offer letter was accompanied by a note confirming that the selection committee had been unanimous in their decision, with Audrey recusing herself from the final vote to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Still, he hesitated to accept. Did taking the job mean accepting Audrey's deception? Could they move forward with so much unresolved between them? The answer came on a Saturday morning when Emma discovered a package on their doorstep. Inside was a children's book about honesty and forgiveness with a note tucked inside. I miss you both. When you're ready to talk, I'll be waiting. Emma clutched the book to her chest. Daddy, can we call Audrey? I want to tell her about my science project. Looking at his daughter's hopeful face, William realized that whatever complicated feelings he had about Audrey's revelation, the simple truth remained. She had brought joy into their lives. The woman who had steadied herself against him on that icy morning, who had shared meals at their table and stories at Emma's bedside, that woman was real, regardless of her bank account. He picked up his phone. The conversation was long and sometimes difficult. They met at a neutral location, a quiet park where Emma could play while they talked. Audrey apologized again for her deception, explaining the isolation her wealth had created, the barriers it placed between her and authentic connections. I should have told you sooner, she admitted. I just didn't want to lose what we were building. And what exactly are we building? William asked, his tone softer than it had been at their last meeting. Audrey's gaze was steady as she reached for his hand. A foundation, she said, something strong enough to support whatever comes next. William looked at their joined hands, her manicured fingers interlaced with his calloused ones. It won't be easy, he warned. Our worlds are very different, but we're not, Audrey countered, not in the ways that matter. From the playground, Emma called for them to watch as she conquered the monkey bars. They both waved and cheered, united in their affection for the little girl who had in many ways brought them together. I accepted the job, William said as they walked toward Emma. Audrey's smile was cautious but genuine. They're lucky to have you. And what about you? He asked, stopping to face her directly. Do you still want us now that everything's out in the open? In response, Audrey rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his, a kiss that held both apology and promise. More than ever, she whispered against his mouth. Emma's delighted giggle interrupted them. Daddy's kissing Audrey. She announced to no one in particular, her approval evident in her wide smile. William laughed, pulling back slightly but keeping his arm around Audrey's waist. Is that okay with you, Pumpkin? Emma considered this seriously before nodding. Yes, but only if she still comes for spaghetti on Sundays. I wouldn't miss it, Audrey promised, her heart full as she looked between father and daughter. 1 year later, Audrey stood in the center of the newly completed East Side Community Center, the project that had brought her to that icy street where William had first caught her. The building was a marvel of sustainable design, incorporating many of the principles William had championed in his interview and later implemented as the project's lead engineer. The grand opening had drawn a substantial crowd, with community members exploring the facilities that would soon house everything from after-school programs to job training centers. Emma darted between exhibits, proudly telling anyone who would listen that her daddy had helped build the amazing building. William found Audrey in the library section, running her fingers along the spines of brand-new books that would soon be available to neighborhood children. "Admiring your handiwork," he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "Our handiwork," she corrected, leaning into him. "This was always meant to be a community project. I just provided the resources." "And the vision," William added. "This place will change lives." "Speaking of change," Audrey said, turning to face him fully. "Emma asked me a very interesting question this morning while you were in the shower." William raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "She wanted to know if, when we get married, she'll have to call me Mom or if Audrey would still be okay." William's eyes widened. "When we get married, not if," Audrey laughed, the sound as bright as it had been that first morning. "Your daughter seems to think it's inevitable." "And what do you think?" William asked, his expression suddenly serious. Instead of answering, Audrey reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. "I think," she said, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant ring, "that Emma is absolutely right." William stared at the ring, then at Audrey, his surprise giving way to a slow smile. "Aren't I supposed to be the one doing this? I've never been particularly traditional," Audrey reminded him. "Besides, I'm the one who fell first literally and figuratively." "And I caught you," William said softly. "You did," Audrey agreed. "So what do you say, William Parker? Will you marry me and make our little family official?" William's answer was in his kiss, deep and certain, a promise of all the years to come. When they parted, he took the ring from the box and slid it onto his finger. "Yes," he said simply, "but on one condition. Name it. We find a home that's ours, not your penthouse, not my apartment, but something new that belongs to all three of us." Audrey's smile was radiant. "I think I can manage that." From across the room, Emma spotted them and came running, launching herself into a hug that encompassed them both. As William lifted her into his arms, Audrey showed her the ring now on William's finger. "Does this mean yes?" Emma asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "It means yes," William confirmed, looking at Audrey with all the love that had grown between them since that chance encounter on an icy street. "It means we're going to be a family. We already are," Emma declared with the certainty only a 7-year-old could muster. "This just makes it official." Audrey laughed, her heart fuller than she'd ever thought possible. "Out of the mouths of babes," she said, leaning in to kiss Emma's cheek, then William's lips. Around them, the community center hummed with activity, a testament to what could be built when vision met opportunity, when worlds that seemed separate found their common ground. Just like the foundation of their relationship, it was something strong and lasting, designed to weather whatever storms might come. And it had all begun with a moment of imbalance, a hand extended in steadying support, and two people who saw each other clearly despite the barriers of circumstance, a connection that proved more valuable than any fortune could measure.